my name is Claire Reisman. I use she, her pronouns. I am the assistant manager at the Chadwick Garden at UC Santa Cruz. And today this evening, we're talking about getting started with deciduous fruit trees. Hopefully can be a bit of a distraction this evening. We're going to try to take you away from all that's going on just for a little bit and provide some helpful distraction. So a couple things about how this evening's gonna go. Orin, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping, and then Orin's gonna present some information about deciduous fruit trees. And please use the chat function to ask any clarifying questions while he's talking. And if it seems helpful to interrupt him, I would be glad to do so and ask any clarifying questions. And also just put any questions you have in the chat, and I'll keep track of those, and we'll answer as many of them as we can at the end of the session. What else do you need to know? Session is being recorded, and we will send that via email and also post it on YouTube. The YouTube version will be closed captioned, and we'll also send out the slides, so you don't have to worry about scrambling to write everything down. We'll share the slides, and you can also see our previous sessions on YouTube as well as all of the content from the center will be posted there. Also, just a broad warning, we're experimenting with doing videos over Zoom, and I think it's sort of to the idea of talking about pruning is like dancing about architecture. We're going to try to show some pruning and some planting and all that stuff. So that being said, hopefully it'll be a dynamic experience. It could also be a very slow and maybe choppy experience depending on the bandwidth available. So bear with us, and please let us know in the chat if you're having trouble hearing or seeing the video content. And again, experimental experience, we'll see how it goes, but hopefully it can add another level to our session tonight. So I think the other thing, Vanessa is working behind the scenes. She's our program assistant, and so we will be talking to Vanessa to advance the slides, but also if you have any questions, she'll be active in answering them in the chat. And I'm realizing Delise is running our slides. So Delise, could you advance it? I think there was perhaps, okay. Yeah, so I think that is it from me, and I'll throw it over to Orin.
Okay, I'm going to say, hey, next slide. But I want to talk to you about fruit trees, of course, but I want to plug our affiliates group, the Friends of the Farm and Garden. This session, as are all the other sessions we're doing these days, are brought to you by our affiliates group, the UCSC Farm and Garden Friends of. And this is a group, a cohort that's been around, different members since 1977, and their task, and they perform it marvelously, is simply to support the UCSC Farm and Garden and its apprentice program. And they do this in innumerable ways. One cute little one is today, Lise Weir, our president, who's running the slides and created the slideshow, put a bag of goodies, cookies and such, outside the Chadwick Garden gate. Well, that's support. But they help us in innumerable ways. And so I would encourage you to think about becoming a member of the Friends of the Farm and Garden. There are perks, no doubt. As mentioned on the screen, if you're local, you get 10% off at local nurseries for fruit trees. There's a quarterly news and notes newsletter, which is excellent. It contains detailed, helpful articles on horticulture, agriculture, and other updates about the farm and garden. You'll get early entry to our annual plant sale. And more than that, I think the biggest perk from supporting the UCSC Farm and Garden Apprentice Program and joining the Friends of the Farm and Garden is that you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that you're supporting our work. We teach the rudiments of organic farming and gardening, and we try to weave into that fabric threads of social justice and inclusion, working towards a more equitable food system. So I'm sure you'd want to support that and give it some thought. Okay. Before we get to the agenda here, I usually start these things by reading something, a quote or something. And I was already intending to read these short verses, but in light of the unsettling events in Washington, D.C. today, I feel them to be all the more pertinent. And I really hope that in some small measure, they can convey both persistence and hope. So this is two short poems by that icon of the Harlem Renaissance, Langston Hughes. So on persistence. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. And on hope, well, it's actually entitled Hope. Sometimes when I'm lonely, don't know why, keep thinking I won't be lonely by and by. All right, keep on keeping on, folks. Let's move on. You see the, oh, we can go back. You see the agenda here. Let's go back to the previous slide for a second, Elise, if we can. This is what we're going to try to cover. And I'm going to start off here with a little, we go to the next slide, a little soliloquy of sorts, you know, a soliloquy, a speech in a play in which the actor, the character stands on the stage and speaks their thoughts aloud and alone. So I'll read a little piece and then we'll get into just regular talking here. But well, let's just go to the next slide and I'll read. It said on the previous slide, sunlight is paramount, and indeed it is. You're going to need at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight on your fruit trees from the time they bloom to the time they fruit. Now, for those of you who live in a mild climate like this, a little shade, as it were, on the trees in the off season, the fall to spring, can help with winter chill. That is to enforce their dormancy. We'll talk about that more later. But sunlight is important. Sunlight fuels photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, which is the most important reaction on the planet. Photosynthesis first forms and then grows and finally fruits the tree. And remember that old fruit grower pseudo haiku. The more sunlight you intercept, the more fruit you get. Okay, that's 13 and not 17 syllables. And you know, I've never heard a fruit grower start off a haiku, but still. And then maybe to close out this little soliloquy, which is of course about sunlight, and that is paramount. We could steal, as it were, borrow the logo of University of California, which says Fiat Lux, let there be light. So at the most basic level, fruit tree growers are harvesters of sunlight. The sun provides the energy that is converted from light to manufacture sugars and dry matter by the process of photosynthesis, which happens in the leaves. The tree uses these sugars, carbohydrate sugars, produced from photosynthesis to do everything it does, to make cells, to make all its parts, root, shoot, flower, fruit, and leaf, and as an energy source to fuel its metabolism. So sunlight, the sugars produced via photosynthesis, it's kind of like a sourdough starter, or maybe a good cup of French roast in the morning. Really kicks things off. You just need to ensure wherever you're going to site your trees that they're going to get a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day. 8 to 10 in truth would be better. You can, in growing trees, almost everything we do is in support of photosynthesis. It's from site selection to water. There, in textbooks, it says photosynthesis happens in an aqueous solution. That means water in the leaves. In order, if it's a sunny day, you can take advantage of that. You can have the tree photosynthesize optimally, make sugars and grow itself if there is enough water first in the soil and then up into the tree in the leaves. So that's important. The act of improving your soil via cover cropping, fertilizer itself, or compost is also paramount in supporting photosynthesis, providing nutrients and organic matter, again, will help grow the tree. Your goal is to grow a big tree and to grow it quick. Big tree has branches, big tree has leaves along the branches. Again, the leaves are the manufacturing plant for photosynthesis and grow the tree. In fact, when we get to pruning next week, pruning is really largely about sunlight, creating a geometric form of a tree so that sunlight hits all portions of it, to facilitate sunlight and photosynthesis. So enough said, I guess. Sunlight is paramount. Let's go to the next slide here. Site selection. Site selection is, of course, critical, and you have a bunch of factors you can consider, but I find a lot of times with a home grower, the home gardener, it's not so much you going out and looking for a site, you got what you got. So in a sense, you could say that the site selects you. But again, make sure you're out away from the house, other buildings, trees, so you have a good arc of sunlight, 6 to 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours like that. But if you do have a choice, and you can, you might think about siting your trees on a slight slope, a gentle south-facing slope in the northern hemisphere, a gentle north-facing slope in the southern hemisphere, will give you a little more grow power. You can see in this slide here, this is a depiction of how the sun strikes the ground, slope and flat ground. The way it works is on a slope, and we're talking a gentle slope, certainly under 8 degrees, maybe 2 to 4 degrees, a gentle south-facing slope. The sun will strike the ground almost or closer to 90 degrees or perpendicular, straight on, you might say. And in doing that, its rays are concentrated and it delivers more sunlight energy, which begets both air and soil warmth. A south-facing slope with this little boost from the concentrated rays of the sun will warm a little quicker in the morning, stay a little warmer longer into the evening, warm a little quicker seasonally in the spring coming out of winter, and similarly stay warm longer into the fall. And just a little bit of a slope will aid you in that regard. Flat ground is good too, but the sun's rays will be more dispersed as they hit the ground. It's not bad, it just doesn't have that much grow power. Another alternative not depicted in this slide would be a north-facing slope. North-facing slopes are cooler and the least preferable of all aspect. Aspect is a term that's used in geography and agroecology. It means the direction that a slope faces. So a south aspect, that's good. Second to that, maybe a southeast aspect, so that you get quick warming in the morning, quick drying out after a rain like that. A southwest slope would be, if I lived in Santa Cruz, well, matter of fact, I do, cool coastal conditions here, we get a lot of morning fog. So a southwest slope would probably be a little more advantageous than a southeast facing slope, in that there's more sun in the afternoon, stay longer into the evening like that. Okay, we can go to the next slide. This is whenever I see that, this is from a book I wrote. It's called Fruit Trees for Every Garden. I think there's a slide at the end, by 10 Speed Press, published it. And I was trying to talk to them about some visuals. So I had a literal file folder, and I drew a little thing on like this on it, trying to say, we need to have something that talks about the lay of the land. And I held it up, and I was in a room with a bunch of professionals, and they all kind of got ghostly white and snickered a little bit, but they were able to make this out of what I scrawled on the paper. So look at this. This is, again, you've got on the left, a north-facing slope. We're just going to rule that out. And on the south, on the right, a south-facing slope with a little step bench. You see where right above the arrow that says south slope, and then flatland like that. So let's kind of compare and contrast facing slopes assumed and flat ground. South-facing slopes are warmer, as mentioned, but they could be windy, particularly at the top of the slope. Down more, they're more protected. And I think on a slope, if you had your druthers, as they used to say in the 70s, if you have a little step or a bench, as you see here again under the south slope arrow there, that's probably the best of all situations. It's sheltered, not like the top of the slope. It's a little bit flat, easier to work. One of the disadvantages of slopes is they're just hard to work, whether it's by hand or on a tractor like that. Then you get down to flat ground like that. Other things about slopes, they're usually much better in terms of frost. Cold air drains down slope, settles in the bottomland. South slopes are going to be much more frost free. And this is critical during the bloom period when the trees are in bloom. Most deciduous fruits have very little tolerance, even a few, apricots being the most finicky. A degree of 2 of frost will just knock out the blooms and you won't get a crop like that. So that air drainage is good, but also on a slope, what you get is soil or water drainage. It's facilitated by the angle of the slope. But as Ronald Reagan once said to Mikhail Gorbachev, trust, but verify. Okay, don't assume your slope has good drainage. Do a perk test. What's a perk test? You simply dig a hole about a foot wide, a foot deep, fill it with water, let it drain. Come back and rinse, repeat. Come back and fill it again. And it should drain within 1 to 3 hours. If it does that, you're good with drainage. If it drains quicker than an hour, it means you have an extremely sandy soil, and this is problematic. What's the solution? Organic matter that is delivered to the soil via cover crops and compost. And if it takes longer than 3 hours, it probably means you have a clay. And again, and that implies poor drainage in this instance. And what's the solution? Again, cover crops and compost to open up that tight, sticky clay. But generally slopes, even again, just a gentle slope in the yard will have a little better drainage. Let's get down to the bottomland. Some of the richest land in the world is at the bottom of hills, valleys, these alluvial floodplains that give us the breadbasket soils of the world. Flat ground, well, hey, it's flat. That's an advantage. You can work it easier again, whether by hand or with a tractor. Flat ground, a little less of a microclimatic boost from the sun's rays. Yeah, that's true. And there may be drainage problems. Again, do a perk test. A big problem if you have a noticeable hill and a bottomland is as that cold air drains down the slope, it settles at the bottom of the hill, and indeed bottomland is often referred to as a frost pocket, and that again, that can be extremely deleterious like that. Your bottomland will have deep soil. Your slope will have less skinnier soil. Your bottomland will be easier to work. The slope is a little gnarly, but you can do it if it's a gentle slope like that. The bottomland will be wind protected. The slope, as you go up it, will be a little more wind exposed like that. So some things to think about in siting your trees. But I'd also say in siting your trees, maybe this is the coda or the outro to siting your trees here, is put them where you can see them. What's that old expression? Out of sight, out of mind. Don't let that be you. I say the opposite of that is proximity leads to prosperity. If you go by your trees daily in the side yard, on the walk, if you can see them out the window as you're washing the dishes in the morning, as you're sitting enjoying a beverage, maybe an adult beverage in the evening, listening to a soundtrack of your choice. Mine might be John Coltrane, but that's up to you. You see them and you can you're prompted to take care of them in a timely manner, but also you can enjoy them. You can watch them as they grow. You can watch them in terms of the seasons. One of my favorite sites is in the growing of the persimmon. It has a really interesting architecture, and it's kind of like a downy bark in the winter. It's cool. And at least out in the summer, it's kind of dull leaves. It's really dull, boring, hard to see green flowers, a little nubbin green fruit. And then the season progresses into midsummer and then into fall, and you get these large, almost glowing orange globes. And then one day, as the temperatures drop in mid-late fall, boom, the leaves will go from green to fiery red, orange, all ablaze. And it's just, what a sight. Now, if you can watch that out your window as you walk down the walk, isn't that cool? And then a wind will come up a few days later, whoom, the tree will be bare, but with these orbs of orange, it almost looks like a mythological fruit. And then you have this beautiful carpet of fiery red orange leaves. Use the leaves either in making compost or just leave them there as a mulch in place. So that's the outro to site selection. Let's move on. Okay, it's that time of year. 'Tis the season for planting bare root fruit trees. And most people, and I am in the subset of most people too, what's your first impulse? Grab a spade, grab a tree, dig a hole, plant the tree. Don't be that person. I'm going to echo the chorus to a very early Marvin Gaye song before he reached the fullness of Marvin Gaye with What's Going On. And he did a great, I heard it through the grapevine, but early on in his career, he had the song and the chorus went, don't you do it, don't you do it, don't you break my heart. You only have one shot at improving the soil before you plant the tree. These trees are long-lived specimens. An apple tree can easily live 75 to 100 years. There are pears in the hills of Tuscany that are carbon dated to be in excess of 200 years. They're gnarly, but they're still producing like that. Even the shortest lived of all the deciduous species, apricots and peaches, will live 30, 40 years like that. So make sure you do a few things before you plant. One, you would want to, as the slide says here, you want to assess and then improve your soil before planting. Assessing your soil has two main components. One is you simply get a soil lab test. I recommend this lab, A&L Western Lab. If you're in other regions of the country, there's an A&L South Lab, an A&L North Lab, East Lab, and on. They're really reliable. And if you tell them what you're growing, in this instance, fruit trees, and you tell them you're growing organically, I'm hoping you do, they'll give you very specific recommendations regarding organic fertilizers, how much to put on per, they usually give it for the gardener in either 100 or 1,000 square foot, how many pounds per 100 or 1,000 square feet, like that. So do that. That's like a baseline study with your soil. Tells you very much what nutrients are in your soil and at what levels. It tells you what the pH is. It's pretty cut and dry. It's not everything about a soil, but it's really important baseline information. For instance, if you don't have adequate levels of phosphorus, the tree or anything else will not grow well. You have to go and get a phosphorus source, of which there are innumerable ones and organic ones, put it on the soil, do another test, they say 3-6 months later, and see if you're up to snuff with your phosphorus, like that. So that's a very easy thing, maybe cost you 30, 40 bucks. Could be the best 30, 40 bucks you're ever going to spend, folks. Another way of assessing the soil is a qualitative assessment. And that's simply looking at it visually, doing a field test, and there are a number of things that I'm not going to go into today, but I would love to have one of these sessions where we did assessing your home garden soil, and we could do some short videos and show you the deal. But quickly, darker soils are richer. They have more organic matter. As you move from sort of pale, brown, black, black is the best. Black is beautiful. It's the richest soil, indicates high organic matter with its associated nutrients like that. And you pick up a handful of soil and you kind of feel it and thumb through it like that. And you want a soil that has that's crummy. It's good crumb structure is what it's called. So you want a crummy soil. That's C-R-U-M-B-Y. You don't want a crummy soil. C-R-U-M-M-Y. So what's growing in your soil? How vigorous is it? There are a number of qualitative indicators that can help you with your soil. Dig a pit. It's called a profile. You know, as above, so below. That's a nice philosophical thing, but it ain't necessarily so with soil. You can have a beautiful topsoil. You may go down a foot. You may have some sort of encumbrance, rocks, or the soil may turn very quickly from a rich topsoil to a very sticky clay soil. You need to know this and take action. Okay, taking action. I've coined it the 3 C's. Cultivation, which is just a fancy word for tillage, digging on a garden scale, plowing on a farm scale. Cultivation, compost, and cover crops. The 3 C's, this drives the engine of your soil. And you probably should have started, if you want to plant trees now, you probably should have started in the fall, maybe September, October, November. Maybe if your soil wasn't so good, maybe started in July or August, or maybe if it's really not that good, you should have started last year and engaged in a really strenuous regimen of soil improvement with deep tillage, compost, and cover crops. So woulda, coulda, shoulda, that's nice. It's not too late. If you live out here in Central Coast of California, now's the time to plant trees. Back east in the north, a month or 3 later. But you could do this now. Well, it's a little dark now, so maybe tomorrow morning. But what you do, whatever the area is utilizing the 3 C's to improve your soil to make it suitable for planting a tree that will live a long time. Whatever area you're going to grow in, it could just be 1 tree, a 4 square foot area, or 10 trees or 100 trees, doesn't matter. But go out to that area. If there's any vegetation on it, weeds or anything else, skim it off with a spade, spread it evenly over the whole area, chop it with a spade or a machete. That'll help it break down quicker. And then engage in some deep tillage, as I said. On a garden scale, it would be good to double dig a raised bed. On a field scale, you use what's called a chisel plow, and it rips the soil at depth. But before you do that, you designate the area you're going to grow in. You skim weeds, spread, chop them, and then you put on compost before you dig. By pre-applying compost, whatever depth you dig to, that compost will be uniformly spread through that depth, and that's a good thing. So pre-spread the compost. How much? It varies, but if you just have 1 or a few trees, I would spread about 1 spadeful per square foot. If you're working on a farm scale, about 5 tons to the acre. Okay, you've delineated the area, you've skimmed and chopped the weeds on the surface, you've applied compost, and then you engage in deep tillage. This will work this material, both the green material and the compost, into the depth that you dig. And then I would come and I would broadcast sow a cover crop. If you're doing this in the fall, I would use what we in the trade call BVOP. That's a combination of bell beans, vetch, oats, and peas. The legumes fix nitrogen. That's bell beans, vetch, and peas. They also have a biodrill taproot that goes down and essentially deep digs your soil. The grasses, well, some of the richest soils in the world are formed over perennial grasses. I give you the Great Plains of the Midwest, the steppes of Russia, and these soils are the breadbasket soils of the world. They're in a soil order called the malt soils. Mala meaning soft, less in to mollify like that. And they're the richest soils in the world. But they got that way because they had perennial grasses growing on them for millennia. The nature of grasses and their roots is they're very fibrous and rug-like. And they just work the soil, physically work the soil, break it up. You couldn't work the soil any better with a garden fork than grassroots can. So BVOP, bell beans, vetch, oats, and peas. You also could use mustard. Utilitarian and good. It doesn't fix nitrogen, but it really forages for nitrogen. It doesn't fix nitrogen biologically like a legume does, but it forages for nitrogen that's in the soil, takes it up, sequesters it in its plant parts, and then when you chop it into the soil, releases that nitrogen again. Mustard is also good at concentrating phosphorus and calcium. If it's summertime, say you said, I'm going to plant next January fruit trees. Yeah, my soil's really not that good. I'm going to start a cover cropping program in July or August. Use buckwheat or Sudan grass. And they are two things on the opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of their makeup and their vigor. Buckwheat, I call it a mighty mite. It gets like knee high at the most. It's this stringy little plant. You look at the roots and you say, what roots? And yet you grow it as a cover crop, chop it into the soil, and it improves soil structure like nobody's business. It's phenomenal. It is also a good forager for phosphorus. So it's good at cycling phosphorus. Sudan grass is kind of just the opposite. Scatter the seed, duck and cover. It'll grow 6 to 8 feet in 6 to 8 weeks. And you want to take it down before it gets too big. It's really hard to chop down and chop up. So maybe when it's thigh to chest high, you chop it down, turn it back into soil. So summer cover crops, buckwheat and Sudan grass. Fall, winter cover crops, BVOP or mustard. BVOP again being bell beans, vetch, oats, and peas. Okay, you've got you sown your cover crop. What I'm going to suggest is that you mulch, you just rake on a garden scale, broadcast sow it relatively evenly, rake it in with a metal bow rake, just so it's slightly covered, and then mulch the whole area. Again, 1 tree, 4 by 4, many trees, big an area as you've delineated like that. Then you want to mulch that soil so it's not open, particularly going into the fall, winter. You want to shield it from the rains. And you have a lot of choices. Typical choices would be straw, not hay. Hay has seeds, you're not really interested in that. Leaves, broadleaf deciduous trees. We don't have a lot of those species in our climate, but if you can get them, they're good. And the third one, which is my preferred mulch for fruit trees. And again, let me stress, it would be, first of all, it would be wood chips. Any type of wood chips, it really doesn't matter. They could be broadleaf, they could be conifers, they're all good. I've been using them for 40 years, and I don't want to sound like a used car salesperson or an evangelist, but I could preach a sermon on the benefits of wood chips, how they reduce water loss, how they ramp up soil biology, and after you get going for a year or two, how they very quickly break down, considering they're almost pure, well, wood like that. So I'll put on a layer as much as 3 to 5 inches, and I do it in spring and then again in fall. Okay, so you've sown your cover crop, you put a mulch down in some fashion, water accordingly, go away, go write the great American novel. Come back when that cover crop is again still lush and green, hasn't gotten kind of carbonaceous and woody, isn't quite flowering yet. Maybe when, again, it's at least knee high, maybe waist high, a little higher. And then you drop it and chop it. What do I mean by that? You take it and you cut it at the base. You can use a spade, you can use a machete, you can use a weed whip, and then you chop it up into small pieces. And then you mulch right over that again. And you sow more cover crop. And so you get this perennial mulch cover crop system. At some point in there, I would delineate where I'm going to put the trees. And at some point in this climate, now is the bare root planting season through the end of February, I would dig my hole and plant my trees. But you only got one shot to improve your trees, your soil for your trees, so don't blow it. Maybe we could, you got to give it your best. So we can echo Pat Benatar in her song, "Hit Me with Your Best Shot." Okay, next slide. Let's talk, let me just say, these are tags that are on Dave Wilson trees. You might find a better fruit tree nursery somewhere in the world than Dave Wilson, but you'd have to, I can't imagine that you would. In this area, almost all nurseries stock their trees. If you want to buy direct from them, you'd have to buy 200 trees, and we're probably not going to do it. The trees are the range of varieties, the range of rootstocks, the range of species of fruits, the quality, it's excellent like that. But what are some of your other choices you may need to make before you plant the tree? Obviously, what are you going to grow? Apples, pears, peaches, plums, your choice. We'll get to what grows well in Santa Cruz in a few slides down the road here. But something you want to, and the variety, that's up to you too. I have thousands of recommended varieties. But after you choose your variety, probably your most important choice is selecting a rootstock. When you look at a fruit tree, there are actually 2 genetically distinct individuals that have been fused together by grafting. So you have the top part of the tree, the variety, Fuji apple, Bartlett pear, Santa Rosa plum, etc. This is known as the scion, S-C-I-O-N. So you have the scion Fuji, the scion Santa Rosa. And then from the base of the trunk through the root system, this is the rootstock. They are 2 distinct genetic individuals that have been grafted together into one, a compound thing. When we think of rootstocks, they do a number of things for the tree, to the tree, for you. But the main things we think about when we think about rootstocks is tree size. And so the notion comes up of full size, semi-dwarfing, and fully dwarfing rootstocks. We'll get to some specifics in a few minutes here. But rootstocks control tree size quite a bit. And the other thing to keep in mind, the more dwarfing your root system, the more precocious the tree is. And that is actually a word that's used in the fruit industry. Age. The more dwarfing the rootstock, the quicker quicker in its life that tree will come into fruiting. So dwarf trees are precocious. Hey, much like Mozart, a precocious lad allegedly writing sonatas at age 3 to 5. So the dwarf tree will come into bearing earlier. How different in terms of bearing? If you take a semi-dwarf rootstock and get you maybe an 8, 10, 12-foot tree like that of apples, it'll start to have a few fruit on it at 3 to 5 years of age. It'll have a pretty much full fruiting capacity at 5 to 8 years of age. If you take some of those big, marvelous, old, full-size apple trees, 20 by 20, 20 by 30, it probably take 8 to 10 years before they have any fruit on them, and 15 to 20 years before they hit their stride and are mature bearing trees. So a dwarf rootstock tree will be smaller. You can get more trees in a given space. It'll come into life smaller. It makes it easier and safer to take care of. It'll come into bearing earlier. And if you were to analyze, and it's done, the fruit bearing capacity, production component, dwarf trees out yield big trees. They don't on a per tree basis, but if you measure, and they have, what are the pounds of fruit as per the volume of the canopy? The dwarf tree is more productive than the larger tree. You can get more dwarf trees in a given space. So on a per area basis, dwarf trees out yield big trees. I mean, there's nothing more marvelous than having a 30-foot apple tree you can put a swing in, push the kids on it, sit in the shade, drink a mint julep and all that. But they're really impractical for care. I recommend semi-dwarf rootstocks. Let's move to the next slide. It's a little schematic, so be it, moving on. Okay, there are quite a few rootstocks out there, and I've grown most of them over 40 years. But here are my recommendations. And even, well, let's take apples. Okay, a lot of rootstocks, especially apples, are alphanumeric. They have a letter and then a number. What's up with that? What's going on? As Marvin Gaye once intoned. It's just this clunky thing. The letter is an abbreviation for where that rootstock was developed or bred. In this case, M is for Malling in England, a very famous English rootstock breeding station. And B here is short for Bargovsky, which is just really cool to say. It's a Russian concern. G is short for Geneva. Geneva Testing Station, associated with Cornell University, is one of the most remarkable research stations in the world for fruit trees like that. So that's what the letter means, and the number, and I wish they hadn't done this, all that the number means is M27. At Malling, they had a bunch of rootstocks they were testing for their dwarf nature. They trialed them out, and hey, that one in plot 27, that looked real good. Let's clone that and sell it to the world. So it was just the plot that it was in. And they've done us an extreme disservice, because when they released them, they should have renumbered them as 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is small, 2 is medium, like that. It's not that way. For instance, M27 is smaller than M26. It's just the way it is. There are charts. So let's look at these apple rootstocks. M27 is a true dwarfing rootstock for apples. You could grow it in a half wine barrel or 20, 25 gallon pot. So those of you who want to grow deciduous trees in a pot, go for this mini dwarf or M27 rootstock. B9 is a little more vigorous. Another thing about rootstocks, which really doesn't apply if you live in California, is some rootstocks are much more cold tolerant than others. B9, Bargovsky 9 is very much that way. Russian rootstocks and Polish rootstocks are bred for extreme cold hardiness because they're trying to push the production of apples way up latitudinally. Yes, there are Siberian orchards. And what they're shooting for is, what is the average expected snowpack in these northern areas, say 5 feet? We want a tree that's under that because snow is a huge insulating blanket. Anyhow, M27 mini dwarf, B9, pretty good. The Geneva series are new in a sense that they're just recently on the market. And these are two good ones that will give you a nice compact tree, 6 to 10 feet. And M26 and M7 are good as well. M111 is about the most vigorous dwarfing rootstock you can get, coming in at 15 to 18 feet. And you'll see all of these have a range, 4 to 6 feet, 6 to 8 feet, etc. What's up with that? What's up with that is that while rootstock is the prime driver of size, whatever the variety is, it contributes to secondary vigor factor. So some varieties are more vigorous than others. Let's take Fuji. It's like a tsunami. It's a monster. It just grows like crazy. Let's take one of my favorite apples, an old English apple called Cox's Orange Pippin. It's about the weakest variety on the plant. So if I put up a Fuji on a M111, it'll be 18, maybe even 20 feet tall. If I put a Cox's Orange on a M111, it'll be 50, maybe only 12 feet tall. So there's some variability there. With pears, okay, so apples have the most steps along the gradient from dwarf to full-size rootstocks. With the other fruits, not so much. With pears, there are full-size and semi-dwarfing rootstocks. And it really, just to cut to the quick, the only one I would use is this one here, Old HF333. It's Old Home Cross Farmingdale 333. The Old Home is, they found this rootstock, this stump of a tree that looked like a rootstock that had dwarfing capability, and they found it on an old homestead, Old Home. And then Framingham, or Farmingdale rather, is a research station in Illinois. And this again was the 333rd plot like that. That's the rootstock you want to get. With stone fruits, there aren't real stone fruit, anything with a pit in it, peaches, plums, apricots, nectarines, cherries, and the like. They tend to be very vigorous species, and yet there aren't very good dwarfing rootstocks. Citation is your rootstock of choice for semi-dwarfing stone fruits. And one that I've been fooling around with, and the Mariana 2624 is about the same as Citation. One that I've been fooling around with, and I think I can, in good conscience, recommend it to you for plums, and that is Krimsk, which is another Russian rootstock. It's cool to say Krimsk. Krimsk 1, because there's a whole series of them. And I've been able to keep plums that are generally 12, 15, 18 feet at 6 to 8 feet, and they're fairly productive. So some choices for you out there. But think about it. You know, what size do you have to allot to a tree? And choose a corresponding rootstock. It's going to help you out. Okay. Let's move on. Let's talk about shopping for trees. Let's just say you want to get a quality tree. There are two types of trees out there as depicted on this slide. One is called a whip. It's just the stick, the trunk. It's not branch. The other is called a branch tree, as you see on the right. You want to get a branch tree. A bigger tree with more branches will have more leaves, will photosynthesize better, and will grow quicker and get you to fruiting sooner. The tree on the left, the little whip there, it'll look like the tree on the right in 2+ years. So if you can, get a branch tree. You want a tall tree, up to 7 feet, at least 4 or 5 feet, up to 7 or 8 feet tall. And you want to look at what's called the caliper of the tree, and that's the diameter 2 inches above the bud union. You see that little hook here? And a little stem scar, that's the bud union. That's where the top part, the sign, the variety, was butted onto the rootstock. Like that. But you measure the caliper or the diameter of the tree trunk 2 inches above that. And you want to get a bigger tree is better. And they've done studies that the bigger tree, 1/2 inch caliper or bigger, up to 7/8, 3/4, 7/8 is good. Bigger is better. pretty much. Costs you a little more, but it pays back not even in the end, even just quickly like that. But they've done studies that shows that the bigger tree at planting in terms of caliper and branch will be not only just come into fruiting earlier, but it will have more fruit for quite a decade and a half than the smaller tree. Okay, we can move on. That's kind of what I just talked about. What do you want? You want a tree that has a good caliper. You want a tree that has a good number of branches in terms of length and also their distribution horizontally and vertically. And you want a tree that's tall, and you want a tree that has a good root system. Now, when you look at bare root trees, you'll say, yikes, that is a skimpy root system. In a comparative sense, they're way top heavy, but in a relative sense, you need more roots rather than less roots. Okay, let's move on. In Santa Cruz County, what grows well? Apples, pears, plums, and pluots. A pluot is a cross between a plum and an apricot. It amounts to being the sweetest plum you ever ate. Quinces, persimmons, some figs, most notably Mission, White Genoa, Osborne Prolific, and perversely Desert King does well on the coast here. Walnuts do well here. In fact, you may have heard of Walnut Street. Well, I walked it last year and there's no walnuts left on it. But when I first moved to town, down by where PetSmart and all those shopping center is on the river levee, that was a huge walnut grove. What grows passably well in Santa Cruz? Apricots and apriums. You get a crop 1 in 5 years. Pomegranates, you'll get some fruit and they'll be all right, but not great. Peaches and nectarines grow great here. They fruit well, and often if we have reasonable summers, they'll get sweet as all get out, but they are extremely subject to a leaf fungus called peach leaf curl, to the point where the tree can totally defoliate. It'll refoliate, but it takes a toll on the tree. And cherries just don't do well here. They do well in the Santa Clara Valley, but I found Stella to be an exception. It's a dead ringer for a Bing, and it's really good. And it's kind of a natural dwarf. The old joke about cherries is, well, they're tall, right? So tall cherries are for the birds, but Stella can be maintained at about 8 to 10 feet. Let's keep going. Here's some sources you can buy locally, you can buy online. Trees of Antiquity is the only reputable quality organic tree nursery I can think of offhand. Rain Tree has an amazing array of varieties, only one rootstock for most of their trees. Stark Brothers in Columbia, Missouri is really good too. Cloud Mountain is kind of a small nursery up north in Oregon, and they have an amazing array of varieties. As I said, local nurseries stock the day will. In our area here, San Lorenzo Garden Center, Midtown or downtown by Nevada River, the Garden Company on North Mission, and Sierra Azul and Aladdin down in South County are excellent tree nurseries with really knowledgeable service people. Okay. Apparently we're going to plant a tree. So you've got your tree, bare root. If you get it as soon as you can, you plant it. Any time that elapses, you need to what's called heel that tree in. Is you just put it in a piece of ground and it'll hold. If it's going to be more than a week or so, have it at 45 degrees facing north, and that keeps the buds from breaking from dormancy. But once you're ready to plant that tree, check the roots. If they're not wet, soak the roots, maybe 1 to 3 hours, not longer. Digging the hole, what's that old expression? Don't put a $5 tree in a 50-cent hole. It needs to be updated for inflation. Don't put a $30 tree in a $3 hole. Don't skimp. Dig a hole wider and deeper in the roots, certainly, but I generally would recommend ample, 2 plus 3 feet wide and maybe 2 feet deep. Fracture or fork the bottom of the soil for drainage. Gopher baskets. If you live in an area that's very prone to gophers, like a sandy meadow, if you are not willing to trap gophers or have someone trap gophers for you, you might consider using a gopher basket. I hate them, and yet they're utilitarian, of course. I've seen a gopher take down a 7-foot tree. And figs must be filet mignon or chocolate truffles for them. They just devour figs, not the figs, but the roots. So you might consider either buying or making your own gopher wire basket. If your soil is in good shape, stop. Don't you do it, don't you do it, don't you break my heart, don't plant that tree, do some cover cropping, composting and such. But if your soil is in reasonable shape, plant that tree today, you don't need to amend the soil, period, drop the mic and all that. You probably don't want to put fertilizer in the hole. You really don't want fertilizer, certainly not chemical fertilizer, but even organic fertilizers in contact with the roots. What you do is you plant the tree and then you top dress it with some fertilizer. But you probably don't even need to put compost in the fill soil if your soil is reasonably well. If it's not, I would say no more than 25% of whatever the volume of the soil compost added to it. Pre-mix it, homogenize it, and then put it in the soil. But really what you want to do is improve your soil so you have a good soil environment for the tree to grow in. And sprinkle the roots with mycorrhizal powder. There are innumerable products of them. This is a fungi, a series of fungi species that live in association with plant, in this case, tree roots. They're ecto and endo. They exist outside of, and some migrate into and grow inside the roots. These are basically root extenders. They can extend the root mass of the tree, and they go out and forage for water and nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, bring it up into the core of the root. And so it's a mutualism, a symbiotic relationship between a home, the roots for the mycorrhizal fungi, and nutrients and water for the tree, like that. It's really cheap, really easy to do. Just sprinkle a little on your roots prior to planting. Next. Oh, look, we gave a workshop a number of years ago at the farm. We planted some trees. So on the left are two friends of mine, former students, now colleagues. On the right, Sky DeMuro. On the left, Zoe Hitchner. Farmers, orchardists, flower growers, flower cutters, flower arrangers extraordinaire. And they have dug an ample hole. Yeah, they have, and they're setting the tree. And then the tree is magic. The tree has been planted in the middle slide here. Here I am watering it in. And this is purposeful. Look, when you're planting a tree, as you're filling the soil in, stop a couple, 3 times and tamp it down a little bit. Don't stomp it, but tamp it down lightly. Once you've planted the tree and you water it, you do what I call mud it up. This is not a cute little delphinium or lettuce seedling that you have to, emulate a gentle spring rain in terms of watering it. You're mudding it up. You got a little basin. Good transplanting, whatever the plant, whatever the size of the plant, is predicated on good root soil contact. This will get you there. You can access your inner child, play with mud, all that stuff. Okay, next slide. The bud union, which I can't see because I see your faces on the screen here, is that little hook in the trunk at the base. And again, that's where rootstock and scion were budded. That's the most vulnerable portion of the tree, prone to rot. And it's really important for that to be above the soil level, 2 to 4 inches. The other thing is if you bury the stem, the trunk, the scion, the variety, it undoes the dwarfing nature of the rootstock and you grow a full-size 30-foot tree. So bud union, 2 to 4 inches above the soil level. Stem scar, that little spot on the base of the trunk where the budding occurred. There's a little scar from when they cut off, pruned out the trunk of the rootstock once the bud of the variety took and grew into what is now your tree. That's the most vulnerable portion of the tree. So if you have it facing north, the trunk of the tree will shield it. That's probably, somewhat important on the coast. That's probably critical inland. Also, if you live inland, it's probably a good idea to whitewash your tree trunk for the first couple of years until you get enough of a canopy to shade the tree. And you do that with just use a water-based latex, cut it half with water and paint it onto the tree. It's kind of a pas de deux act, do-si-do and all that. It kind of takes 2 people to plant a tree. One holds, one fills, and then tamps accordingly. And then you water in like that. After you've planted the tree, this is my recommendation, Use a granular, organic, certified fertilizer. There's tons of them out there. Sustain is one, Dr. Earth, Gardener and Bloom, Blood Meal, and on. And use anywhere from about a half a pound to a pound of it. Sprinkle it on the surface in about a 2+ foot radius or circumference like that. And then add on to that 2 or 3 shovelfuls of compost. Work that lightly into the soil 2 to 4 inches with a fork, and then mulch over it with the aforementioned revered wood chips as a mulch. Okay, next. Apparently, we have a madman roaming the hills of Santa Cruz, and he's going to talk to you about planting a fruit tree. I'm going to run and hide. Here you go. Push the button.
Hi, folks. Let's quickly talk about planting a dormant fruit tree. We could talk aesthetics, philosophy, even physiology and rationale later. Let's put this tree in the ground and let's prune it. What I have here is a quality tree. I mean, an extremely high quality tree. What comprises a quality tree? You want a tall tree, 4, 5, 7 feet tall, number of branches that are well distributed both horizontally and vertically, of good length, and a thick caliper tree. Caliper is the measurement, the diameter of the trunk, 2 inches above the bud union. This is about a 3/4 caliper tree. And you want a good root system. Now keep in mind that a good root system, and this is a good root system, seems skimpy compared to the top part of the tree, but that's just the way it is. I have roughed out a hole here. It's about 2 feet deep and 3 feet wide. One thing you'll notice is that fruit tree roots are not symmetrical to it. So I've just roughed out a hole that these roots will fit in. Now when you plant, you want to make sure that the bud union, this bulbous area here, is 2 to 4 inches above the soil level. So let's place the tree in the ground. I'm going to place it with the bud so that the trunk of the tree protects that. That's the most vulnerable portion of the tree in terms of sun scald. So I'm going to put this tree in the ground, and we need a pause.
All right, there's a sequel apparently.
About planting a dormant. As you can see, I placed the tree in the hole. The dimensions are good. The roots are spread. I have a little stick here. That's a leveling stick to show the true soil level. Again, when I plant the tree, I want to make sure the bud union is above the true soil line. But what I have in my hand here is a package of mycorrhizal fungi powder, or as I call it, magic pixie dust. This is a good thing to sprinkle on the roots of your trees before you plant them. It comes with a little spoonful here. And what this is a number of species of mycorrhizal fungi which live in association with tree roots, help them as root extenders and help them to forage for both water, nitrogen, and phosphorus. It's a good thing, like I said, magic pixie dust get you there. So I'm just going to sprinkle a couple of tablespoons on the roots. A little dab will do ya. And well, it's not rocket science. I'm now going to bury the tree, as it were, or bury the root system. So I'll just start, and I'll do this in a couple, 3 stages. So I put maybe a third, half of the soil in, and now I'm gonna just tread on the soil a little bit to tamp down the soil. The tree stands erect, and then I'll finish the job. I might note this is something better done with a partner. I don't have a partner right now. So this soil is much improved. Thus, I didn't add compost to it. If your soil isn't quite as good as this, you might consider augmenting the fill soil a little bit of compost. I'm going to go around to the other side. Just turn it off. Okay, let's finish the job. A little more. No, I'm always reticent to step on the soil. I'm going to just lightly tread on it. One of the keys to success with transplanting, whether it's a lettuce, a delphinium, or a fruit tree, is good soil root contact. So I've ensured that here. And we are good to go. What I would do next is sprinkle 2 or 3 shovelfuls of compost in a 2-foot circle around the base of the tree. Put on about 1 pound of organic certified granular fertilizer. Work that into the soil 2 to 4 inches, and then mulch off with wood chips. Then I would water in. You can make a basin and just hand water it. And when you're talking about watering in a fruit tree, again, it's not a little delphinium or a lettuce seedling. You really mud it up. You just saturate it. And that again gets you good root soil contact. Okay, we're good to prune this tree next. Okay, let's finish the job.
Okay, let's show the pruning in the driveway, Delise, and then maybe given the time, we could just take questions on planting and pruning here. Next week is more in depth on pruning. But if you look at this slide here before we go to the, I'm calling our production crew the not quite ready for prime time driveway company. But before we go to that, this is a rendering. Fruit trees are grown to geometric shapes. There's a number of them. The object is to both intercept as much sunlight as you can, and to, very importantly, to allow sunlight to penetrate to the core of the tree. So the 2 easiest forms are on the left, a modified central leader, an inverted comb, and on the right, an open center, big sun cup like that. Another way you can look at the modified central leader is an isosceles triangle. Let's do the clip in the driveway of pruning.
With trees, you have 2 options. Option 1, an unbranched tree, AKA a whip, or a branch tree. Let me show you how to prune these 2 trees. It's really quite simple. Let's do the whip first. You want to make a heading cut on the trunk, the whip, about 6 or 8 inches above where you want your branching to start. That's traditionally done at 18 to 24 inches. And if you look at the base of the tree here, you see this little hook in the trunk. That's where the bud was attached when it was budded. And so if the bud goes this way, you want to pick a bud for your top bud that goes the opposite way. That's it. What's going to happen now is that the lead bud will assume apical dominance, grow up. Maybe you want to get 2, 3, 4 feet this year from it. And the next 3 to 5 buds down, if you're living right, will break from dormancy and form the initial branch scaffold for this tree. That's it. But if you can get a branch tree, you're so much better off. This tree, handsome young tree, is about 2+ years down the road from where that whip's at. That whip will get here in a couple, 3 years. And what I like about buying trees locally is I can inspect the individual tree, both the root and the shoot system, but I also can look at it and see where I'm going. That is, I know I want to grow it into this tree form. In this case, an open center form. And some trees just lend themselves more to being open center and some to modified central leader. This is really quite simple. Don't be alarmed. The open center is composed of 3 to 5 primary branches that are spread equidistant one from another around 360 degrees of the trunk, and they grow up and out at about a 60 to 70 degree angle, and it might look about like that. There I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay in number, but you notice this branch is over this branch, and that's a no-no. This branch will very quickly shade out this branch. So I'm going to go with 4, and I could pick either of these, but I'm going to keep the one that's higher up, and this is a thinning cut. I thinned it out, put it on the ground. And the reason I made that choice is you want as much vertical spacing between these branches as you can get, so that this one was a little higher up than that one, thus it gets to stick around. And these trees are almost, these branches are almost perfect in their horizontal distribution, one growing out there, one here, one there. I might train this just a notch like that to have it be equidistant again between its 2 neighboring branches. And then I'm going to make a pruning cut on each branch, and the general rule for a just planted tree is cut it back about half its length and cut it to a under-facing bud, so the buds are directional arrows. So if a bud points in this direction, that will be the resumption of growth. In this direction, that's the way it'll grow. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. We're done. Okay, we're going to prune this.
Okay, a little redundant, but there you go. We'll do more with pruning next week. We're hoping to have a couple of little more professional videos for you. We'll see. But so you improved your soil. You selected your site. You improved your soil. You got yourself a quality tree. You planted that tree. You fertilized it and mulched it and watered it accordingly. Fruit trees need pollinators. Part of your job is to foster biodiversity and attract what I call the 3 Ps. Pollinators, native and non-native, honeybees and other native bees. The 3 Ps are pollinators, predators, and parasitoids. Predators and parasitoids are simply beneficial insects that can predate on harmful insects. And you foster biodiversity in that regard. You encourage them to come and hang around with you, as it were, by planting flowers. Flowers, all manner of flowers, but particularly members of the Compositae or the daisy family, members of the carnation family, members of the umbelliferae or Apiaceae family, the carrot family, dill, parsley, etc. The native shrub buckwheat and its relatives are really good at attracting pollinators, again, native and non-native. So grow flowers. Now you may think flowers are pretty and they make great bouquets. But that's not why flowers are around. A flower is simply an advertisement, an attraction. It says in one form or another, color, scent, form, to a pollinator, yoo-hoo, come on over here. I got a reward for you. And what's that reward? It's pollen and nectar, protein and carbohydrates, 2 basic building blocks of any diet. So you can create a lush habitat by planting your yard, your farm, your garden with tiered plantings. You can grow flowers, some of the ones I mentioned previously, and attract these pollinators and beneficial insects. What we have on this slide here is the cutest thing in the world, a bee hotel. This is a little thing you could actually just get some sticks and tie them together. You could drill out a 2x4 in the end and make some recesses in it. Or you can purchase these really groovy bee hotels. I have no idea what the BB stands for. Bed and breakfast for bees? Yeah, sure. But this is a mason bee hut hotel, and they're very easy to purchase. You can get One Green World, a great nursery online, sells them. Rain Tree Nursery. Most entities online that sell fruit trees will sell mason bees. So you can buy them and you can get some sort of a housing unit like this, and you can start to raise them. They are tough critters. They can fly when the temperatures are really low and the wind is high and the rain is wicked at times when the honeybee is hunkered down. So they can really help you out with getting good pollination, thus fruit set on your fruit trees, particularly during inclement weather in the spring. The other thing is they will naturalize on your property. So once you make an investment and you get going with them, they're self-perpetuating. And they're just really cool to watch. They're non-stinging and they don't mind living next to other bees, but they're not colony bees like the European honeybee. So the mason bee, it's really great. When you go to buy them, make sure you're getting the Western species, not the Eastern species. I think I'm gonna stop. It's a mercy rule, like in Little League, huh? It's okay, do all this stuff here. This is a beautiful espalier tree. Maybe we can see if there's questions.
Well, actually, there were a couple questions on container gardening. So Delise, if you could go back, so about small spaces and small trees. So if you do want to speak to this, there were questions on that.
Okay, growing trees in containers, I could speak to that, as I mentioned before. My inclination is not to do it, but if you do it, make sure you have a dwarf tree, and by dwarf I mean either it's naturally dwarf, some trees are, but more probably a tree that's on a very dwarfing rootstock. As I said with the apples, we depicted on the slide, M26, bud 9, nothing bigger than that. And make sure it's about a half wine barrel. That's plenty good. Make sure your soil has actual soil in it. Don't just get a potting mix. They're insufficient in almost every regard. Now, I don't mean to be too harsh, but they're insufficient as a primary growing medium. What I would do is I would get some good garden soil and supplement it with a potting or a planting mix that you can get at nurseries like that. If you can get compost, so much the better. Mix that into the blend like that. But it's feasible to grow dwarf fruit trees, deciduous fruit trees, apples particularly, perhaps pears. There's one pear that is, again, almost a natural dwarf, and that's called Seckel. And even on a pretty good sized rootstock, it'll only get 6-8 feet tall. And its nickname is the sugar lump because it's this little bronzy thing about this big, and you can eat it right off the tree and it just melts in your mouth. So the Seckel pear would be good for containers. There are genetic dwarf peaches and nectarines, and I'm not real wild about the flavor, but they're all right. But they will grow in a container pretty well. They won't get bigger than 3 to 4 feet. They're good like that. Citrus is an excellent candidate for containers. Again, a 15, 20 gallon container or a half wine barrel. And again, citrus on true dwarf rootstocks. You take a big old citrus like they used to grow in the south part of the state in Riverside, full size non-dwarfing rootstock will be 30 feet tall. If you take a semi-dwarfing rootstock, it'll be 12 to 15 feet tall. You take that same, let's say navel orange, and put it on a truly dwarfing rootstock, it'll be maybe 5 or 6 feet tall. The mandarin oranges are more dwarfed by their genetic nature, and they're also good candidates for container growing. If you have a restricted space, this picture here, this photo here is really good. This is a system called espaliering. Espalier comes from French and it means shoulders, like spread shoulders. And it's simply a two-plane tree. Obviously, it's not literally a two-plane tree. It's just a restricted form tree. You grow the central leader of the trunk straight up, and you have a set of horizontal arms that come off it. I'm going to offer a word of caution, which is I do not recommend buying pre-formed espalier trees in the nursery. Several things wrong with them. They put the horizontal arms too close together, and very quickly the top ones shade out the bottom ones and they become non-productive. The other thing is they usually have 4 or 6 arms on it, and they have 4 or 6 varieties, and there's no sense to the varieties that they've chosen to put together. Some are vigorous and some are not. So what I would do is just buy a regular tree and train and prune it as an espalier.
And then also about the multi-graft.
Multi-graft trees, yeah, another thing I hate, but highly recommend, which is a multi-graft tree. You can get a fruit cocktail tree. One limb is a cherry, one is a plum, one is a peach, and on like that. Or you can get a pluot that has 3 varieties on, or like that. You can get apples, you can get pears. And the advantage of that is for people who have small spaces and can't plant a bunch of trees, they can plant one trees and have a number of varieties. There are usually 3 to 5 varieties grafted onto these multi-grafts. And they do a pretty good job of picking, say, apples or peaches or whatever it is that ripen over a succession of time. So you're going to have a pretty good extended harvest. Now, having said that, I will say apples are the best at that. You can get apples that ripen in July. You can get apples that ripen in December. The best you can do with most of the stone fruits is about a 3 or 4 week extended harvest period. So you could do that, or you could kind of make your own, which is a little pricey. Right now, a tree is going to cost you $30 a pop. So you can put dig a bigger, wider hole. It's like 3 or 4 feet wide, and put 3 or 4 trees in it. And so what you're doing is you're growing an open center, a sun cup, as it were, as a tree, but you're doing it so that each scaffold limb is an actual individual tree. So you space the trees evenly around the circle and have them cant out a little, maybe 30 degrees out like that, so they grow up and out like that. And that works well. If you're going to do that, don't mix genera and species. Don't plant pears and apples and plums and such. Plant apples or plant plums or plant peaches in the same hole. And try to suss out what is the vigor of the varieties, because you want varieties that are of the same vigor, either moderate or strong or even weak. But your multi trees in a hole need to be varieties that are approximate equal vigor. Okay.
Yeah, Delise, if you want to advance it to the next slide. So going way back to the beginning about planting and site selection. In the hotter inland regions of California, are there cases where planting on a cooler north-facing slope would be advantageous?
You got it. I didn't mention that, but yeah, in some really high sun, high heat areas, say Chico, the valley floor, you would make it easier both on the tree and you when you're out there tending it like that. In an area that's moderate or cool like Santa Cruz, it could be deleterious. But yeah, and on that north slope, that soil is going to be a little thicker, richer, deeper than that south-facing slope. So it could be your cup of tea, as it were, if you live in Chico.
A question around cover crop and young trees, and would the cover crop grow taller than the tree? And I would assume some concern around that.
Kind of cool. Yeah, then you just go out and knock it down. You can top prune it, the cover crop, that is. Yeah, maybe you leave a 2-3 foot circle around the tree like that. Or you just go out and, I mean, if you just got a few trees, you just go out and chop the top off like that. But if you have a good winter, remember we used to have good winters when it rained a hell of a lot, and you get your cover crop in on time, if you're using the aforementioned VBOP, bell beans, vegetables, and peas, in a good winter, look at 6-8 feet tall. But I'm going to recommend for the home gardener that whatever cover crop you're growing, you take it down early. You take it down early when it's succulent, nitrogenous, and green, because that just facilitates chopping it down and chopping it up. But in this case, it will protect your cute little tree.
A couple of questions about chill hours. Do warm days reduce chill hours? And it just...
Yeah, I didn't even mention chill hours. Chill hours is an adaptive strategy that fruit trees have. Most of our fruit trees come from northern frigid climates. Apples from the Tian Shan, the heavenly mountains of Kazakhstan. Almonds, not that you can grow them in Santa Cruz, the mountains of Iraq and Iran. Peaches, plums, nectarines, apricots from northwest China. So in those climates, you have frigid winters. The trees would have an adaptive strategy of course, dropping their leaves, hardening their buds, making them cold hardy, and actually making these little leaf scales, sort of like bud blankets to protect them like that. And then they produce, and as the tree goes dormant, it produces an acid, abscisic acid. And this, of course, causes the leaves to fall off the tree of size. But this also suppresses the tree from breaking from dormancy for a while. And the while is depending on how much abscisic acid is produced, and that's a varietal characteristic. So you have some varieties that have a high chill, some a moderate chill, and some a low chill like that. All fruit trees are cataloged as per what their chill hours are. All regions are cataloged as per what the chill hours are in that area. Chill hours defined simply are the number of hours cumulatively with temperatures between 45 and 32 degrees. And once a tree goes dormant, it will not wake up and break from dormancy until it has achieved, logged in its requisite chill hours. You take Fuji, great apple, 400 hours. You take most of the russeted apples, Hudson Golden Gem, 800 hours. So once a tree goes dormant, it's not going to wake up till it has had X amount of chill hours. So you need to pick. We live in an area, Central Coast of California, where from the sea to the summit, well, we have on average about high 400, 500 to 800 chill hours. So we simply pick varieties that have those number of chill hours. If you lived in the upper Midwest, you might have 12 to 1500 chill hours. So you pick varieties that are consistent with that. But this is just a cool adaptive strategy. It's the tree self-defense mechanism, life insurance policy, as it were, to prevent it from, most areas that have winters will have false thaws in January or February. It'll get 60, 65 degrees for 4 or 5 days, then wham, you get hit again with snow and sleet. Were the tree to respond to external environmental conditions, warmth and grow, it would get destroyed, as it were, the flowers and the leaves. It could even be so deleterious, it killed the tree from cold injury. So it's just a self-protective mechanism, chill hours. Just match your area's chill hours with the chill hours of the varieties that you want to grow. But having said that, it's not an exact science. Having said we get 500 to 800 chill hours on average, and in fact, the last 2 years we got sub 400. I'm growing russeted apples that take 800 to 1,000 chill hours, and they generally do all right. So it's not an exact science. But the point that the questioner made is an apt one, which is that warm days, 60 degrees and greater, will undo some of the chill that happened in the night. So yeah, where we get in trouble, like last year, we got 388 chill hours at the garden, and we still got a great fruit set. And the reason was it was a consistent chill. The year before, we got about the same amount of chill hours, and we had a terrible year, very little fruit set. And that's because we had some cold nights, but then we had many warm days that offset the chill.
And what are the chill hours so far this year?
We're pretty good. We're in the high 300s already this year. This has been well, it hasn't been an interesting year, folks. Well, okay, when this year is over and we all emerge the other side, hopefully with our sanity intact, will we really miss anything? Well, I don't know. We're doing pretty good. It's just been consistently cold. I live on the west side here, and boy, it's been frosty almost every night, and I love it. So we're doing good, and the days have been, maybe in the 50s, sometimes in the 40s. So we're getting a good consistent chill. Bodes well. Boy, in the winters where you have good chill, the trees just explode in the spring with bloom, and the same thing is true of roses. Sometimes I'll prune people's trees and we'll have a cold winter, so they bloom like crazy, and they call me up and they want to buy me a 6-pack of beer because I'm such a great pruner, and I may be, I don't know. But your pruning has nothing to do with your bloom. Your bloom is dictated by chill hours. The more chill it is, the bigger your bloom.
Lots of questions about various pests. I don't know if you want me to throw them at you like the plagues and you take them down one by one, or if you want to have a broad approach.
I'm actually not that good at pests and diseases.
Well, squirrels. We can start.
Organic practices being good, but far away. Let's go, Pat Benatar. Hit me with the best shot, Claire.
Well, starting with squirrels.
Okay. I moved out here from the east, missed the tree squirrel. There's tree and ground squirrels. Tree squirrels. I see one about every 7 years, and now they're like crows and ravens. They're everywhere. You can try to exclude them from the trees with flashing collar, maybe 12 inches or so. But if there's anything that they can jump onto from next door, they'll jump on. A woman down the street has a persimmon. She loses a lot of her persimmons, and she plays that right-wing talk radio stuff. Says it does the job, drives them away. I knew that stuff was good for something. And you can trap them. You can use live traps, but then you have to deal with them, drown them, or something like that. So, but they are an emergent problem in our area. Ground squirrels are, if you live in the meadows, we're just encroaching on the ground squirrel's habitat. They're on the ground, but they don't climb up trees. Cute little story. One time we had a fox that took up residence under the tool shed in the garden and had little foxes, and made it a little tough for us to go in the tool shed. She was very defensive. But when they got, kind of be young foxes, they would climb up in the peach trees and eat the peaches. It was terrible, but it was kind of cute. Okay, what other pests or diseases?
Let's see. Rodents chewing on the bases of young trees. And
yeah, this is another a problem I haven't had much experience with. It's a problem in cold winter areas, particularly. Good source of nutrients, protein, bark. But it's pretty easy to, one thing you could do, especially if you're planting young trees, but this works up to trees that have up to even a 4 or 5 inch diameter trunk. You can buy tree guards at the nurseries or online, and they're simply plastic fittings that go around it, and they work well. If you have an established tree that's bigger than that, you can fashion either, again, some flashing or wire, mesh wire to keep them at bay.
All right, well, 6:30 snuck up on me, so I think we should move on to our wrap-up slides.
Right, besides the Warriors are on first tip pretty soon. Apparently we're going to, if you're a glutton for punishment, we're going to do it again next week, same time, same place. Like I said, I hope to have photos and videos in a little greater detail showing a full range of trees, but we'll talk theory and hopefully show you how to do it. Yeah, join us.
And Vanessa just put a link for registration in the chat.
Great. Let me also say that I'll give you my email, Orin, O-R-I-N, at ucsc.edu. And if you have questions or comments, you can get hold of me. And that's been one of the best thing about this series. I get this steady stream of questions. And there was a fella who was a professor, an associate professor up at Chico State. And he got wild about trees. He got 20 or 30 trees and he put them in big buckets and big barrels, and 3 to 5 years passed, and apparently his wife doesn't want him to plant them. So we just kind of concocted a little scheme to infill it like that. But I've been getting some great questions that I'm happy to answer for you. If you have pictures, send them to me, and I can, although diagnostics from a distance can be dangerous, I could tell you about pruning or what's wrong with that tree perhaps. Sure. I guess this is the part where they wanted me to make a pitch about maybe you supporting us, and you ought to do that, but I'm not much for money grubbing. But do join the Friends of the Farm and Garden. This, on the other hand, is of paramount importance. Claire.
Yeah, so traditionally in the past, these workshops have been offered for free, or not for a cost, but this is for free. And so we'd ask that your what you would otherwise maybe contribute for a workshop, you would consider sharing that resource with the Amamutsun Land Trust as the original stewards of this land. And let me pull up a little piece to share from David Robles, who is an alumni of many of our programs and works with our sister program, Food What. This core of the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems work is responsible, sustainable land stewardship. Today, we honor and learn from the original land stewards of these lands, the Awaswa-speaking Yupi tribe. They are represented today by their descendants, the Amamutsun tribal band. We encourage you to understand their history and support their work at the link that Vanessa has shared in the chat, as they continue to reclaim their sovereignty and protect the ecosystem for generations to come. So please share some resources with them if you have it.
We could only hope to steward the land as well as they did. Could I read a little closing statement?
You're the boss.
Okay. This is a foreword from an unlikely named book, How Cows Save the Planet. It's really about carbon farming. It's by a woman named Greta Ehrlich. And it goes like this. It's called Going to Ground. We go to ground when exhausted by disaster or war, when we need to restore ourselves, look natural beauty in the face, and nourish ourselves by growing food. We go to ground to seek solace. Now, as we find ourselves facing a grave threat to civilization, the global emergency of climate change, desertification, and habitat destruction, we would be wise to go to ground to find out how we might survive. Ground, in this sense, represent not only basic sanity, but actual soil and all the life-giving processes that emanate from it. Nature is matrix and embrace. Photosynthesis is foundational, our only true wealth. Without it, we devolve. Poor land leads to poverty, hunger, social unrest, cultural deprivation, inhumanity, and war. So we must wonder why the biological health of the planet is not our #1 priority. Thanks for dropping by, folks. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.